Bonny Village is one of the creepiest locations in Shadow of the Erdtree, and you wouldn't think so at first glance because it seems relatively tame. There's lots of jars everywhere, some almost naked men, some cowering Hornsent spirits, but there's something very dark going on here, and it's the scene of a much more sinister reality. When you reach Bonny Village from climbing up a well shaft, you immediately see these garlands of jars and pots that are strewn about, and this is the first time that we've seen something like this. And what is its purpose? Is it decorative? Is it customary? We're not quite sure. And then there are the Greater Potentates that are patrolling the streets, stripped down to their oily underwear. No, soiled loincloth is what it's actually called, which is so nasty, but it gives some insight as to the people wearing it. These guys have the same caterpillar mask as the Hornsent that you meet earlier. You'll find a blade here in Bonny Village called the Bonny Butchering Knife, and we learn that the Greater Potentates were leaders in gruesome ritual practices. They used these monstrous blades to butcher and dismember their victims in order to fill these jars. This was a practice that seems to have originated in Bonny Village, though eventually it would find its way out to the greater lands between. We learned that a Greater Potentate from this village traveled afar, creating new jar recipes using the methods he learned in his place of birth, and it's these cookbooks that we use to create the different throwable jars. If you continue across the bridge to the east, you'll find a shack with a spirit that you can talk to.
For pity's sake, your place is in the jar. My sainthood itself awaits you within. For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life were you accorded for this alone.
Inside the shack, you will find a vile weapon, the Tooth Whip. This whip was imbued with rotted, decayed teeth meant to inflict the utmost pain in order to encourage obedience. To the southwest of the village, you'll see a barricade of iron spikes surrounded by cages, and it's very evocative of the torture imagery that we see at Volcano Manor. But this scene right here is a foreshadowing of the place that we're about to enter. The icy caverns are filled with jars. Some are suspended from chains, and others are stuffed into prison cells. And it's in this jail that we encounter a new creature that we haven't yet seen, Living Jar Innards, that inhabit the pottery like hermit crabs. They're grotesque and malformed, very much a walking pile of guts and insides. These malformed entities were the result of the Hornsent butchering ritual, the blended mass of their victims' flesh stuffed into great jars to ripen and become saints. Hornsent priests would offer their prayers to the great jars in hopes that the victims inside would be reborn in a purer fashion. The Greater Potentates used this jail as storage for these great jars, and this imagery of them suspended from the icy caverns makes me think that this was part of their awful process of trying to form these saints, like a sick and twisted equivalent to a wine cellar and barrels meant to age wine. And the garland of jars that we see in Bonny Village is no doubt the predecessor step to forming these great jars in the jails. Bonny Gaol is actually one of 3 jails that you find. The other 2 are Lamenting Gaol and Belurat Gaol, and it's in the Belurat Gaol that we learn another disturbing fact about these jars.
Oh, please. Not the jar. Anything but that. I promise. I won't ever do it again. I swear, a living saint I'll surely be. Please. You must forgive me. Forgive me. Please.
It seems that this process would happen to the victim while they were alive, or at least they would be fully aware of their awful fate as it was happening to them. Outside of each of the jails, you can see just how many crates and cages they utilized to transport their victims here. And inside the caverns, it's just cell after cell, more cages, iron restraints. The Hornsent killed so many people that they needed 3 jails to house all of their victims. Alongside these torturous experiments of trying to create their perfect saint, the Hornsent also attempted to create their ideal soldiers called Swordhands of Night. These candidates were born and raised in these cold, dark jails, deprived of ever seeing sunlight. And in Bonny Gaol, you can find a complete Swordhand of Night armor set atop a butchering table, What her transgression was, we don't know, but it's apparent how disposable the Hornsent viewed all of their victims and prisoners once they determined they would be of no use to them. When you meet Swordhands of Night Yolan in the Cathedral of Manus Meteor, you're given a hint that she may have escaped a harrowing fate in these jails.
The poor girl has overcome grave misfortune. Her tongue can be sharp at the best of times, but don't think that makes her a bad person.
Going back to the spirit at the whipping hut and the tooth whip, we know that Bonny Village tortured a group of people called the Shaman in their religious rituals, believing that their bodies blended harmoniously with the flesh of other victims. The Shaman were taken from a small village found in the north, and it's very well hidden and impossible to reach without a gesture that you find in Bonny Village. And finding this gesture here is the clue that links these two locations in an impossibly gruesome and heartbreaking way. In the lap of a beheaded statue at the foot of a withered tree to the northwest of the village, you pick up a gesture called "O Mother." In front of a headless statue of Queen Merica at the bottom of the Shadowkeep, you'll find a message imploring the reader to have mercy for the spirited away shamans. When you use the "O Mother" gesture in front of this statue, the platform will move to reveal a hidden passage that takes you to a place called the Hinterlands. And immediately upon setting foot here, you'll see a beautiful spanning meadow of wildflowers. This area is being guarded by 2 tree sentinels. Clearly, there is something of great importance to be found here, and traveling up the path to the right, you'll soon find out what that is. At the base of a small golden tree, you'll find a minor Erdtree incantation. Merica used this incantation to bathe the village of her home in gold, knowing full well that there was no one to heal. Reaching the summit of this village, you'll find another statue like the one in Bonny Village, but unlike that one, this sculpture is intact. A woman with flowing hair and arms outstretched. In her lap we find Merica's golden braid. It was her offering to the grandmother. What was her prayer, her wish, her confession? There was no one left to answer, and Merica never returned home again. Shaman Village is the game's biggest revelation about Merica's origins. We can surmise that this small village was where she came from. It's where she called home. Her people were captured, tortured, and all of them were ultimately killed by the Hornsent to be used in their barbaric rituals. These awful creations in the jails are no doubt the only remnants left of the shaman, the visage in the form of a woman blindfolded, with flowing white hair that melts into the meaty mass around her, and on her forehead, a carved symbol. In looking at this closely, you can overlay Merica's rune, and it's a perfect match. The Hornsent might have branded the shaman with this symbol. They might have marked them to distinguish which ones went into which pots. And maybe Merica took this symbol of her pain, she took a part of it and made it her own as a constant reminder of what the Hornsent did to her people. In the Lamenting Gaol, these living jars actually have a very different appearance. They're covered in faces, and you can hear the mixture of different voices crying out. And at times, predominantly, it's a woman's voice. You'll also find in this jail a torch shaped like a human head, the Lamenting Visage, and this torch has an unusual ability called the Blindfold of Happiness. Swing the head while covering the eyes, unleashing a wail of lamentation. To those who seek happiness, blindness is bliss. And this might be the logic employed by the Hornsent, blindfolding these shaman women in the belief that it would somehow elevate them to a state of blissful paradise. The blindfold might also serve to symbolize their execution at the hands of the Hornsent. When I first saw this image, it reminded me of a painting titled The Execution of Lady Jane Grey, and we see here the young queen blindfolded, reaching out in front of her, failing to find the block upon which to place her head. There's a spirit in this jail that gives us another clue about this jarring process, and it says that it can't stand the sounds of lamentation, that it doesn't need the salvation brought upon by listening to it to just please make it stop. And in this room, you'll also find the lamentation prattling pate. The boss fight for the Lamenter's Jail is a being called a lamenter, and this figure is wearing a mask that was part of the ritual here in the jail, subjecting the victims and prisoners to the sounds of weeping and wailing in order to transform them into a state of peace. This was mental and psychological torture that the Hornsent were employing in this jail, and it was no doubt just another way they were trying to experiment and create a saint. The jails were the dirty little secret that the people in Belurat Tower denied and kept hidden from the world. It's relevant that we don't find any great jars in either the Tower Settlement or Ener Elam. And I interpret this as them realizing that their attempts to create saints hadn't worked as intended. There was no use for all of these jars that they killed so many people to create. They had tried to take the matter of life and death into their own hands to form life in their own terms, to emulate the process of evolution that they saw in the Crucible, but their attempts all failed. And ultimately, their actions would put Marika on a violent path, seeking retribution for the suffering done to her people. I hope you enjoyed this video about the grim realities of the Hornsent, and definitely look forward to more Shadow of the Erdtree content because there is a lot more of it on the way. I want to give a quick shout out to my friend Jack is a Mimic. He also just uploaded a video about Marika, so make sure to go check that out. And I want to give a huge thank you to my channel members for your support of my work. I appreciate each and every one of you. And if you'd like to sign up to be a channel member, you can do so on my channel. We have a Discord server. But yeah, you guys are awesome. Love you all. Thank you. Okay, everyone, that is all. I will see you next time. Bye.